The attendance sheet is in one of those boxes as well.
Good morning, everybody. For those of you online, we have David Robertson from Universal Title joining us today. We're going to start. It's coming up on 9 o'clock. So please keep your mics off. We'll keep them open on our end. So Dave doesn't have to, if you have a question, just turn yourself on and go ahead and ask David a question. We'll be running this session on residential purchase contract till about 10:30, and then I'll come in and we'll do a little bit of dot loop. We'll take a break at 10:30, and we'll do some work in that platform. And then at 12 o'clock, we have the NVAR marketing, branding. That's going to be a really great, informative class. We will be recording it and streaming it live, so stick around for that. But to no avail, David Robertson. Yes.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is, you just heard, is David Robertson, not David Donaldson. This happens all the time. I can't tell you how many emails. Actually, they go to you, and they're supposed to go to me. I don't get any of your emails. It all just goes to you. Said associate. We won't name who he is. Okay. So anyway, I'm with Universal Title. We're right next door. I'm a real estate attorney, and been asked to come here and talk about the contract. We probably have various levels of expertise, either online or right here in the room. So if I go through any part of the contract that you already know really well, I'm not trying to offend you. I'm sorry. But some people sitting here probably first time in real estate, and maybe you haven't been through this stuff before. So maybe it doesn't sound that exciting. Gee, let's talk about a contract. Great. And I'm sure you read all the contracts you come across in your own lives anyway. You always read those user agreements when you click accept. You read them all, I'm sure. Well, I will tell you, when it comes to real estate and you're representing somebody, how can you really represent them unless you know what their obligations are? You've got to know really the contract like the back of your hand. And I will tell you, it's amazing how much it's going to serve you well. Even just last week, I met with an agent in your office who she just recently closed on her own transaction, and there was a big dispute over some things the sellers didn't fix. They agreed to fix some things on the home inspection, got to the final walkthrough, they weren't fixed, and there were some new things that were caused as well, some new problems. And she said it was a big mess. And the other agent knew that she was inexperienced and tried to use that to their advantage and say things that were in the contract that weren't in there. So later on, we talked about it. We had a meeting last week, and we talked about the parts of the contract that were, had to do with their dispute. But I think it just reminded me, though, is if you just know what it says, that will really answer I don't know, at least 85, maybe 90% of disputes on a real estate transaction. I don't know. Does that seem surprising to you? That, I mean, come on. It's right here in black and white. Why are we fighting about this? But I tell you, it happens all the time. Maybe people forget. Say, oh, I forgot I agreed to that. Or maybe people are trying to pull a fast one. I'm sure they won't remember that we agreed to that, and maybe I won't sweep the house and leave trash all over the place and see if I can get away with it. I'm not sure. I guess people have different motivations, but it is amazing how many disputes in a real estate transaction are resolved just by knowing what the contract says. I get questions on it all the time, which is fine. I'm happy to help. And we'll go through the contract today. I'll cover the different parts. I'll focus on the things that aren't so obvious. You all being intelligent people, of course, I'm not going to read the whole thing to you. But I do encourage you to read it at your own. If you haven't done it yet, have you read through the contract yet? At least? Okay. You're not alone. Don't worry. But
No, we'll start reading through it on Thursday.
thanks, Deb. It's amazing. When you ask a question, it seems to come from everywhere. It's voice on high.
So my goal would be to pick up where you left off on Thursday with them, okay?
All right. Awesome.
And read through.
Okay. And I know it's not exciting. I mean, 16 pages, and that's just the base contract. That's not the extra stuff, the contingencies and addenda that go in there too. But if it takes 2 or 3 or 10 cups of coffee, you really have to get through it, word for word. Maybe even read it a couple times, just so you know it well. And life's an open book. When you're in a real estate transaction, you've got a dispute. Sure, you can pull up the contract in front of your client and say, "Oh, I think you agreed. Where were they supposed to fix that?" You can do that, but how's that going to make you look compared with already knowing to the other agent says, "Yeah, sorry, we didn't get around. I'm getting the trash out." If you already know, "Ma'am, thank you, but it's paragraph 10 where it says trash and debris are supposed to be removed." How's that going to make you look as opposed to looking it up? You're going to be awesome. They're going to say, this guy knows what he's doing. I'm so glad we hired Dennis. So that's what we'll go through. The things that aren't so obvious. We'll look at also the different parts and how to use them best to your advantage, depending on who you represent. The advantage of your client, I should say. So if you represent the seller, what's better to have here? How about the buyer? What's more in their advantage? Any questions before we get started and just roll right through? Okay. Well, looking at the contract itself, if you've got your binders in front of you, it starts on page 92. The most recent version of the NVAR contract is July 2017. That's what we're going to look at. Why NVAR? Well, around here, these are the forms everybody uses. In Northern Virginia, they're the ones that that make the standard forms. I guess I'll tell you generally too, they try to make the forms fair. They try. And I've sat on the forms for a couple years. It's been a while, but that really is the idea. It isn't just a bunch of lawyers in a dark room coming up with this stuff to make your lives difficult. I guarantee it's not. The forms committee that makes this stuff up, by the way, it's made up of 3 parts. It's 3 attorneys, 3 salespeople, and 3 brokers. I'm sorry, 4 of each. It's 12 people altogether. So the idea is to have some balance on the committee and to talk about, okay, how can we make forms that are going to help people get through transactions? Let's try to erase as much ambiguity and confusion as possible. The contract used to start, Deb, do you remember how long did the contract used to be? Way back when?
Well, if you're adding the jurisdictional addendum into it, it was almost twice as long, right?
Well, I guess that made a different form. Although when that went away, that just sort of merged into the current contract. I'm thinking back to when it was 1 page.
Oh, I wasn't there then. I was there maybe 4 or 5 pages in.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to insult your age here. I was a long time ago. It used to be just 1 single page. And then as people have more disputes, people have complaints, hey, the contract doesn't work, it doesn't answer this issue, then they add more stuff in here. Now we have 16 pages. Maybe also because our society's become more litigious. That might be where the more pages come from as well. So looking at the contract itself, it's on your screen too. You can see, where do you start? Well, the offer date, it's usually going to be the date you write up the contract that you're going to send it over to the listing agent. You've got the buyer and the seller. And as far as what names to put there, of course, the buyer names, well, it's your client. Hopefully, there's no confusion there. The name of the seller, that can sometimes not be so clear. When you have, when you're writing an offer on a property that went through foreclosure, and the name of the person who got foreclosed on is still on the tax record, and you maybe aren't necessarily sure, well, who's my seller here? You're going to have to ask the listing agent, and they can tell you. Sometimes they'll say, put in owner of record. Sounds kind of strange. Who's Mr. Record? Is he real? Is this a real person? They do that just initially to receive offers. If it really is a bank sale, just so you know, you're going to be signing a contract addendum, which will have the actual name of the bank and the seller on it. But just for receiving offers, sometimes they say that, and that's normal. Sometimes you'll see in the tax records the name of people who are. It might say Mary Smith T.R. You ever see that before? Tax records. What does that mean? Any thoughts? Trustee. TR usually means trustee. So if you want to write Mary Smith as trustee on your offer, that's probably fine. More complete, though, would be, okay, she's a trustee for what trust? So really the complete name of a party on a contract in a trust situation is the Mary Smith trustee on behalf of the Mary Smith Revocable Trust. Okay. You might have estate situations where on the tax records, the person who listed as the owner is no longer with us. And so people who have passed away cannot sign a contract, but probably someone on their behalf can, or their estate, like an executor or administrator. Okay, so those situations, there might be notes in the listing saying something to that effect. Or you might send over your offer, and then the listing agent says, hey, great, thanks for sending over. Look forward to working with you. Just one thing, person on the tax record is no longer alive. Here's who your seller needs to be. And then, of course, you'll have to change it. Okay, what's next? You can see listing brokerage, cooperating brokerage. The cooperating brokerage would be your brokerage company. Represents who? The buyer or the seller. And then they're collectively referred to as broker. You can see that next, right underneath the blank lines. They're all throughout the contract. You'll see references to broker, and that just means both. The real property part is next, and this is just a description of what's being bought and what's being sold. Most of this information you're going to get straight from the tax records. Different counties have their tax records organized a little bit differently, but most of the information is available right there. You got the tax map number. Obviously, that's where you're going to put that in. The legal description, that's going to be right there on the tax records as well. The parking space numbers, this can be a little bit tricky, and I'll tell you why. In some condos and HOAs, the sellers actually own the rights to use a specific space, and it's on their deed. Sometimes the spaces are just assigned by the association. The condo docs might say, okay, each unit gets to use 2 spaces, but the condo then reserves the right to reshuffle those if they need to, and they assign the spaces. Any idea why that's significant? Why does that matter when you're writing up a contract? That's right. This, like I said, this is a description of what the seller is going to sell and the buyer is going to buy. The seller can't, or I should say shouldn't, promise to sell something they don't own. I've seen it many times where you've got a contract and we get over to our office, get ready for settlement, and I see number 304 written in parking space. We get the title search back and look at the deeds, and there's no parking space 304 on the seller's deed. And I know what that means. It means, well, someone didn't do their homework, and the listing agent should not have let their seller sign a contract with a parking space number there. Usually it doesn't come down to a fight, But you could see how some buyers would get a little concerned and say, wait a minute, but I like that space. I want space 304. It's right next to the elevator. It's perfect for me. I don't want there to be the chance of that getting moved to now I got to walk, half a mile to get to my car. I was looking at other units in this building too, and now I'm not real happy that I'm, not going to get that specific space, and it's never going to change. So that's where it's going to be a problem. Okay, that's another thing that's going to be on the tax records. If the owner actually owns the rights to use that particular space, you're going to see a reference on the tax records. It'll say something like PKSP 304 parking space. It might just say PK. Sometimes they say GS, garage space 304. If you see a reference like that, that's what it's talking about. Okay. But if you don't see anything like that in the tax records, I wouldn't put anything here. And I wouldn't put two. Don't make this mistake also. I mentioned the example. So some associations just assign, say each unit gets to park in 2 different spaces. Don't put number 2 here as in you're getting 2 spaces. This is supposed to be a specific space number, not a number of spaces. All right. Parking spaces are expensive. That's why this is a big deal. You know how much they go for? Wow. Excellent. You know exactly how much they cost. Where was that condo? Okay. Okay. Yeah, sure. Some are even more, 20, 30. In DC, you know how much parking spaces are? It's a lot. So it's a big deal. That's why this is so important. So when you're writing as a buyer agent, I already told you where to look for whether the parking space is actually owned by the seller or not. If you're a listing agent, I mentioned we're going to talk about some of these things from each perspective, and you get a contract over, look at it closely, real closely. I know maybe you've got a listing, you're excited to get offers in. Maybe you get multiple offers in. Like, oh wow, this is great. I love it. My seller's going to be so happy. They're going to send me all the referrals the rest of their life. They're going to tell me I did such a great job. All these offers we got in, but you've got to look real carefully at what your seller's going to obligate themselves to. And if the contract has a space in there, or I'm sorry, a number in the parking space, but your seller doesn't actually own the spaces, that's going to be a problem if you let them sign that. Does that make sense? Okay, county, municipality, just to the right of the parking space. This is the jurisdiction, not necessarily the mailing address. I'm sure you all know this already, but there are some properties around here that have a Falls Church mailing address that are in Fairfax County. So that's where you would put Fairfax County here. Alexandria, same thing. Some properties have Alexandria mailing address, but they're in Fairfax County. Tax records are the ones that are going to tell you that, of course. Deed book and LIBOR. Did everybody see that right below parking space? Anyone know what that is? It's supposed to be the recording reference for the seller's deed. When the seller bought the home, where's that deed recorded? Now, it's on the tax records. If you don't put it in here, you're probably still going to be fine. If you have all the other information correct, I don't think there's going to be any confusion about what's being bought and sold. Okay. Yeah. MVAR thought just additional reference would be helpful. Honestly, that's it. So that's what it is if you want to know. It's on the tax records. So if you want to do a complete complete description here, paragraph 1, you can fill that into. It says book/LIBOR. LIBOR is another name for book, and then page/folio to the right of that. Mailing address is going to be next, the street address. Post office address, I guess I should say. Maybe not the mailing address of the seller. Okay. Price and specified financing. I'm going to scroll down a little bit here, and I talked about paragraph 1 without having it up on the screen. I'm sorry. So there you go. As far as price and financing go, pretty self-explanatory, but one encouragement I'll give you is start at the bottom and go up to the top. kind of wish they would have organized it differently, but then mathematically, you set up a subtraction on a math, it wouldn't come out the right way because it'd be backwards. I say start at the bottom because, of course, when you're negotiating a contract, usually sales price is the biggest thing, and the down payment is just a product of what? What's down payment? Anyone know? Sure. Yeah, that's right. Or 20, sure. Minimum. I think that's FHA. I think FHA is minimum 3.5 down. VA varies depending on what kind of certification you can get. Sometimes you get 100% financing with VA. But down payment, all that is sales price minus your loan amounts. That's it. So that's why I say start at the bottom, and then whatever your loan amount is, you can either put a specific amount if the loan officer or lender letter saying an amount, or a percentage, 90, 95, 80%, and that's going to get you your down payment. Is a down payment what the buyers have to bring to settlement? No? What? Come on. Why not? Oh, that's right. There are closing costs too. Excuse me, sorry. I've never had someone show up at settlement and just bring a check for what's the down payment amount of the contract. But I have had people ask me, where's my down payment? And we don't have a closing statement up here for you. There's probably an example in the binder that you don't have to look at it now. It's not really represented specifically as one number on the closing statement when you get to settlement. Like I said, down payment is just a product of sales price minus the loan amounts. So it's going to be part of all the numbers that you're throwing in, your earnest money deposit and the other money you're bringing for closing costs, and then down payment as well. Okay, the deed of trust information is going to be next, and this is what you're going to get from the lender's letter or just talking to the loan officer, what kind of loan the buyer's going to get. I'll put this at the top. First deed of trust is going to be pretty self-explanatory, but obtain, assume. It's almost always going to be obtain. I haven't seen any assumptions in a long time. That means ever. They're pretty rare. Most lenders, I guess way back when assumptions were more common. Can you think of why? Why might a lender be great with assumptions? Yes. Sure. Well, you're exactly right. And that's why can be attractive for a buyer to assume a seller's loan. They got a great rate, and the rates are higher now, and it sometimes can really help sell your house. With rates now really low, lenders usually don't allow assumptions. They would rather start someone on a new loan. When rates used to be a lot higher, back in the 80s, lenders love assumptions. They say, great, yeah, we'll just keep going on this higher interest rate, and we'll keep getting that interest. It's up to each lender, and I'm not a lender, so I can't speak on any lender's behalf, but almost always it's going to be obtained on your contract. Fixed or adjustable, that's what the loan officer is going to have to tell you. And then as far as number of years and a rate not to exceed blank percent per year, again, the loan officer, they would have to say, okay, here's what the rates look like they're going to be. That in paragraph C, that rate not to exceed, everybody see that? When this came out a few years ago, the way it's worded, it led some people to believe that it actually created a contingency where, okay, we write a contract and I'm going to put in not to exceed 4%. But then we get ratified, and then I want to lock in the rate, and the rates are actually now 4.5. And some agents thought, okay, well, it says not to exceed, and I guess it exceeds, so now we can get out, right? Dennis, you think so? What do y'all think? Does that mean the buyer can get out of the contract if the rate exceeds what's written in here? Yeah, I mean, one thing about the contract is I do wish this was worded a little differently because of this confusion some folks had, but it doesn't actually say that. The contract doesn't say if the rate exceeds this, then the buyer can void the contract. It doesn't quite go that far. Why does it say not to exceed? Does the seller care what kind of interest rate the buyer gets? No. Yes. Great question. Yeah. Yeah. Right. They- yeah. Great question. They do. It impacts the financing contingency. So I don't think that's going to be covered today. But when you go to the finance contingency, what you'll see is in order for the buyer to void the contract, they have to get a rejection letter from their lender, and it's a rejection for whatever is written here on page 1. So the idea is they can, if the buyer just wants to get out and they're looking for any reason they can, and they can get a loan with the terms that are written here, they need that rejection letter because that's what the contingency requires them to do. So they say, oh, well, I'm going to go to some other lender, and I don't know, I'm going to say, hey, give me a rate. Yeah, I'm going to apply for this and this kind of loan, this term, this rate. The lender said, no, you're rejected. Here you go. The buyer shows up with that. Say, okay, give my earnest money. Here's my rejection letter. The idea of putting it here on the contract is to say, no, this is what we started at. You're getting a rejection for something which is not this. And that's not going to let you keep your earnest money. Sorry. So that's the idea here. It has to do with the finance contingency. Okay. Conventional, VA, FHA, USDA. You can see there what kind of loan. Second trust is all the same information. If the buyer is getting a second loan, then you'd have to fill that in as well. I guess I should mention this as well. Every page at the bottom of the contract's got a place to initial. So please make sure your client initials. We got to the bottom of page 1, so I wanted to mention it. Make sure they do initial everywhere, sign everywhere they're supposed to. I've been asked before in a contract class, if one initial is missed, does that mean your contract's not valid? It's not ratified. What do you think? They miss an initial. They miss one initial. They initial all the other pages. They sign the last page of the contract. Say they didn't initial on page 1. Any other thoughts? Oh, they didn't read it, so they can't be bound to that. Well, any other thoughts? What do you think? They miss an initial. Eh. Dennis, I think you're right. They signed the end. Even if they didn't read it, I think most judges are going to say, it's on you. You have a duty to read what you sign. And just because one initial is missed, I guess every case is going to be different if it actually goes to litigation. But I think if you initial everywhere else and you sign the last page, most judges are going to say, you got to be kidding me. You're trying to get out of the contract because you missed one initial, but you initialed everywhere else, sign the last page. I don't think that's going to go so well for the person trying to get out because they missed one initial. Someone in the class said, well, what if you missed 2 initials? How about 3? How about 4? All right. Now you're just playing games. But is there a certain number? I don't know. Has this ever been litigated? Maybe. I haven't seen a case specifically on that. I'll just say this, just initial everything, then you can avoid fighting the fight. Just have it all done. Yes. Yeah. You can do that anyway, but people still have to, agree in initial. You mean? Okay. people initial. Oh, yeah, sure. You could do that. Yeah, that's fine. Or if it's just one specific term on page 5 you're changing, cross that out. It's not a whole new page. You just get people to initial that one change. That's fine too. So I think people are going to be held to their signature on the last page, even if one initial is missed. But to avoid the fight, and some people will make that fight. Some lawyers make that fight. The sellers will go hire a lawyer because they want to get out of the contract. Lawyer looks through it. They say, oh, you missed an initial, or the buyer missed an initial. I guess we're going to make our argument. Just to avoid the fight, have it all initialed. That's the better way to go. Okay, assumptions are next. I mentioned I don't think you're ever going to see these, really. But if there is an assumption, the buyer's assuming the seller's loan, might be an assumption fee that comes in, and this is where you deal with it. The deposit paragraph. I'm on top of page 2, paragraph 3. This is where, obviously, you're putting in the earnest money deposit amount, and how much. I mean, I've got some thoughts on that, but you have an idea what's reasonable? What's a general? Somewhere between 1% and 2%. Yeah, that's about right. And it's going to be certainly market driven. If you're competing with other offers, and your buyer really, really wants the house, it's probably going to tend your buyer to put more earnest money in. What does our earnest money say when you put that up on a contract? So I'm serious. I'm going to put my skin in the game. And here's how bad I want your house. Obviously, $500 earnest money, it's not that serious. Someone puts up $50,000, yeah, all right. That means they mean business. They really want the house. But around 1% or 2%, you're not going to be offensive to anybody. That's within the normal range. Okay. I think I saw a contract once with was it $100 earnest money? I think I saw $100. It was a family transaction though, so they didn't hit the market. It was all close in. Okay, so you're going to put the amount right there. The first space is for check, an amount by check. The second space is for a note due and payable. We don't see this very often, but it's for the situation where the buyer, for some reason, they aren't able to write a check right now. Maybe they need to move some things around in their accounts. They have to move money from their 401k into their checking account before they can, and they want to put a really big earnest money down. Okay, but they need some more time. So they're going to submit an offer, and they're also going to sign a note, a promissory note that says, I'm going to pay, probably Keller Williams, if KW is going to hold the earnest money, this much money by a certain date. Any thoughts? What does that convey about the seriousness of the offer, though? They do a note. Is it the same as a check right away? Not really. I mean, it's always better to be able to write a check if you can. If a note is used, usually it's going to be due really fast, 4 or 5 days at the most. Because if you're writing an offer, the seller wants you to have the skin in the game. They don't want to wait around. I mean, if you put 20 days in there, they're going to say, we're going to wait 20 days to see if you put up the money. I don't think so. We're going to go find another buyer. So usually it's going to be pretty quick. But that would be the situation when you use the second space there, where the buyer, for whatever reason, can't write a check at that time. You got due and payable on. When's the note due? Held by, and this is who's going to hold it. Most often, the buyer's brokerage firm holds the earnest money. Most often. Settlement company can as well. That's fine. We do it all the time. Occasionally, you'll have certain sellers require someone else to hold the earnest money. Sometimes builders might be the ones to say, we're going to hold the deposit. New home sales, especially if a home that's not yet built, they usually want huge earnest money amounts, and sometimes in different phases. A few $1,000 here, that's a percentage of completion of the home. We want another few $1,000 here. But it depends on the seller. But usually if there's nothing different going on like that, then it's going to be almost always the buyer's brokerage firm. After the spaces in that paragraph, you'll see a couple boxes. It says buyer has delivered a deposit or will deliver. Almost always it's going to be the first box. That means they have handed over the check. They've delivered the deposit. When the buyer makes the offer, and the buyer agent sends over the offer to the listing agent, the buyer agent should have the check in their hands. It doesn't mean it's been deposited. You don't deposit it until it's ratified, but the buyer agent should have that check in their file. That means has delivered the deposit. Then will deliver would be the next space. I don't see this one very often, but it's not the situation where you've got a note. I can write a check, but I'm in Korea right now. It's going to take a while for my check to get there, so maybe they would fill that in. Wires are fine too, by the way. We receive earnest money by wire all the time. Okay, and so if it's just a matter of sending the check and it's not going to get it for a few days, then a wire's going to be usually the better way to go. Okay, next it talks about the rules on administering that earnest money deposit. It talks about the deadline for getting the deposit into the brokerage account. And that's, you can see the second line there in the large paragraph, by the end of the 5th business banking day. That's the deadline that if KW is holding the check, that Keller Williams has to actually have the deposit in their account. That's not the deadline for you to receive the check from your client or for you to hand the check over to someone at Keller Williams so they can make the deposit. I've heard the rule is 48 or you're late. Have you heard that already? Deb, is that correct? 48 or you're late?
Yes, that is correct.
All right, thanks.
48 or you're late.
Glad I didn't make that up. So 48 hours is the rule so that Keller Williams has time to actually get that deposit in by the end of the 5th business banking day. One type of contract that might delay an earnest money deposit and legally delay it will be a short sale. You might not have gone through the short sale addendum yet or even talked a whole lot about short sales. I'll just say for these purposes, a short sale requires approval by seller's lender who is being requested to receive less than the full amount on that mortgage, and they'll release their lien against the property. Since the whole transaction hinges upon that approval from the seller's lender, oftentimes the short sale addendum will say earnest money does not have to be deposited until that approval comes over. So that would be one scenario where the people put in their contract say, okay, yeah, we know there's this rule about the 5th business banking day, but you can write a contract for a different time frame if you want. And short sale will be the most common example. Okay. As far as how the earnest money is going to be resolved, that's at the bottom of that large paragraph. You can see little Romanettes, 1, 2, 3, and 4. One's going to be the most common one, credited to the sales price at settlement. The buyer sees it right on their closing statement. Number 2, all parties have agreed. That would be if it doesn't go to closing and they sign a release. I got a release over the weekend. Fell apart for home inspection. The party signed a release. Earnest money is going back to the buyer. There you go. That's number 2. They've all agreed. Number 3, a court of competent jurisdiction orders disbursement. All appeal periods have expired. Excuse me. That's if they sue each other. And it doesn't happen very often. Hopefully never happens on any of your transactions. But buyer or seller can't agree. I've got one. We finally got rid of that earnest money where we were doing a settlement where the buyer was not represented, didn't follow the deadlines in the home inspection. He still said, yeah, but I want my earnest money, so give it back. They couldn't agree on who was going to get it. The seller said, I want your deposit. Sorry, you missed your deadlines. And you're walking away. You didn't void properly. The buyer said, yeah, but I still want it. They filed a lawsuit, and we got a court order to us, because we're holding the earnest money, lucky us, saying that we were to disperse the earnest money to one of the lawyers. Great. I'm happy to be done with it. I want to be out of it. So there's an example. A court ordered us to do something with the earnest money, and we did. And then the last one, dispose of any other manner authorized by law. Okay. The I guess the last part here is for your protection, really. The buyer and seller agree. Agent's going to not have any liability. That's whoever's holding the earnest money. And the idea is this: the earnest money is being held as an accommodation for the parties. So if Keller Williams holding the earnest money, and the seller says you need to give me that earnest money, the buyer defaulted, but the buyer says no, we think you're in default, and here's why. Just because Keller Williams doesn't make that call and say, yeah, sorry, buyer, but okay, we're going to give the money to the seller. This is saying Keller Williams should not be responsible. Or vice versa, if they refuse not to let that go. The only caveat is except in the event of the escrow agent's negligence or misconduct. So if they do something that violates those, then they could be liable. Any questions so far? Earnest money? How that works? Settlement is going to be next, and I need to keep remembering to scroll down so you can see what we're talking about, although you have it in front of you. Buyer and seller make full settlement on or with mutual consent before a certain date. How do you get to a date? What do you write in there? What kind of factors are going to determine the settlement date you put on your offer? What do you think? Yeah, when do you want to close? How soon can you close? So you'll need to ask the lender, how much time do you need? If you tell the lender, hey, we want to close next week, the lender says, no, there is no way. The lender's going to have to weigh in on that, and also the buyer. Mr. Buyer, when do you want to close? When do you want to move? The buyer's on a lease, expires in 2 months. Maybe they don't want to close next month. They want to close in 45 days or so. That's going to be up to them. And then, of course, when you get this over, your listing agent looking at that. Mr. Seller, does that work for you on your schedule when you're going to be moving down to Florida? They want to close in 3 weeks. The seller says, yeah, but my place isn't going to be ready for 5 weeks. Sorry. And you can either talk about a different settlement date or you can talk about a post-occupancy. The seller can't move right away. We've talked much about post-occupancy yet. Done that. Seller staying in the home after closing. Usually they pay rent. Usually there's a security deposit. Yeah. Especially in the question. I'm not sure if everyone online can hear the questions that are asked, so I'm sorry. I will repeat those questions going forward. Is it common, especially in a hot seller's market, to have post-occupancy sellers staying in the home after closing? It's more common. And sometimes in a really, really hot seller market, I see free rent backs. No security deposit, or maybe a low security deposit, no rent being paid. Buyers are willing just to give up everything sometimes to get the house. So that's up to them and what they're willing to do. But yeah, that's where it would be more common. Okay. One thing I'll point out to this mutual consent, sometimes that throws people off. So it says on or before a certain date. I've had people say, okay, well, the contract says we're going to close on February 13th, but we want to close on the 11th. Is that okay to show up then? And then I said, well, did you talk to the other agent about that? And they say, no, we didn't because it says on or before. Okay, but if you're going to show up 2 days early, you got to make sure they are too. Because you're going to show up and you want your buyer to sign papers and get the keys. Well, if no one's going to be there to hand over the keys, that's going to be a problem. So I know it says on or before, but don't forget the mutual consent part. And if someone does want to close earlier than the settlement date, you really, really need to get a contract addendum signed to officially change the settlement date. Not just a handshake. Yeah, all right, we'll show up on the 11th. Sure, no problem. Well, without anything in writing, it might be a problem, especially if someone changes their mind. Yeah, I know we said we show up on the 11th, but sorry, I just couldn't get around to it. I've got to take laundry to the cleaners, and let's just go for the 13th. But if it's not in writing,
and lender approval as well.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Make sure they have lender approval. Right.
All right. I don't know if people online can hear questions that come in from the speakers, but yeah. Okay. Dennis says, yeah. Deb said lender approval on the settlement date is crucial. Of course, if you're going to change that, lender's got to be all right with that too to make sure they can be ready on time. So in writing is crucial. And you all probably know this already, but if it's not in writing, does it mean anything in real estate? I don't know of any state where it would count verbal. I should take that back. I'm not a lawyer in every state, so I can't speak on every state. But yeah, absolutely in Virginia, at least Maryland, D.C. So always in writing. If it's not in writing, it doesn't matter. Any questions on the settlement date? Okay, there's a big bold part there underneath settlement date. You can see it there on your screen as well. It's you can see, it starts notice to buyer regarding Real Estate Settlement Agents Act, RESA. You don't have to memorize that. But the big bold part is it's cut and pasted right out of Virginia code. The idea is this: it's telling buyers that that's the first sentence here in the bold part, you've got the right to select a settlement agent to handle the closing of this transaction. The buyer has a right to choose. It is up to them because there's so much that a settlement company does for a buyer, including issuing title insurance. That's why it's a big deal for buyers to work with a reputable company, knows what they're doing, who's going to get people to the table and close the transaction in a way that the buyer and the seller have agreed, and also that the buyer's going to be able to get title insurance to protect their interest in the property. And that's why Virginia and also federal law called RESPA does give the buyer the right to choose. Now, listing agents and sellers, they can ask. We see it all the time, where they say, well, we'd really like you to use this settlement company. Any idea why would they have a preference? Why would they care? Any thoughts? Why would a listing agent or a seller have a preference on a particular title company? Sure. Comfortable working with them, and I get that, of course. I mean, we certainly want people who are comfortable working with us to come back to us as well. Maybe their brother works there. They know somebody. Maybe they own part of the title company. That's possible too. So they can ask, and there's nothing wrong with asking, but what they cannot do is require. They cannot make it a condition of the sale. They can't go so far as to say, we are not going to sell to you unless you use this title company. That is where they go too far. They can also offer incentives. We see this all the time. A lot of times with bank sales or builder sales, they'll say, all right, we'll pay for the title insurance if you use our title company. And that's not illegal. They can offer incentives. They can't require, but they can incentivize. We had one just recently where we're actually going to close tomorrow. It's a bank sale, and it's an agent in your office where the bank on the contract said, we'll pay for title insurance premium if you use our title company. They were more comfortable closing with us because they didn't know the other title company. The bank title company that they use all the time, they weren't comfortable that this title company would be unbiased because how close the relationship is on their side. So they decided to go with us. Mm-hmm. Interesting. Okay. All right. I've seen it many times where maybe it's not an overt statement saying we're not going to sell the home to you unless you use our title company, but still there's a desire not to rock the boat. You're competing with other offers. You want to make your offer as clean and as acceptable as possible. And so if they issue a preference like that, so we want to use this particular title company, and sometimes the buyer actually gets nervous. They think, well, I'm not so sure. My buyer wants the house. Well, it could be something like that. It could be a verbal. You call. It could be in the listing. They can't require it. That's true. The name of the settlement company does get written in here, but usually the preference is not written on the contract. You don't say we prefer somewhere on the contract. It's just going to be some other media. So they might, sure, to the questions, again, I'll repeat, sorry. Where does a listing agent convey their desire to use a particular title company? I've never seen that before, but a little flyer at an open house where they attach something in the listing remarks, or maybe just a verbal exchange. Hey, by the way, thanks for calling, ask about the home. We'd like to use this particular title company. They might say it that way too. So
David,
yeah.
in my observation of many contracts over the years, I have seen numerous times where the seller/listing agent has changed it in the contract from the buyer's choice to their choice. And again, they've had it in the listing where they've preferred that, and then they've gone so far as to change it in the contract.
Right.
So in that case, the buyer may superficially agree to get their contract ratified, but then notice them later that they want to change it to the preferred title company.
Yeah, that's a common strategy, and that's sort of where I was going with the multiple offer situation. You don't want to rock the boat. Listing agents told you their preference. You say, fine, I just say yes for now. It's a yes for now. So we're going to agree. Let's get ratified. We'll agree to that at the title company, and then later on, as Deb said, what's really easy to do is say, oh, by the way, we're actually going to use this title company. And is the listing agent going to be happy about that? No. I mean, if they went so far as to issue a preference and you can create a flyer, they really, really want that of the title company. But is the listing agent and the seller above, well, the law? No. Virginia federal law clear. It says buyers have the right to choose. And the seller can't require a particular use. There's a crucial part here that I want to point out to you as well. I know it's a little further down in the big bold paragraph, but it starts on the left-hand side with variation by agreement. You see that part? It says, the provisions of the Real Estate Settlement Agents Act may not be varied by agreement. Rights conferred may not be waived. What does that mean? That means, in our context we're talking about, even if I sign a contract that says I'm going to use a particular title company, well, I can't waive my rights, so I guess I can change my mind. That's exactly what it means. And if you do this, I'll just recommend don't use an addendum form. Use a notice form. It's a particular form. It's a dot loop. It's everywhere. It's just a simple blank notice form. You can use it for different purposes. But all it has to say is, the buyer shall use this title company. Please take notice. And that's it. And I say notice form because there's something that's not at the bottom, which is real important. Initials or even signature lines. It's just great. If you put it on an addendum, you have your buyer sign it and send it over, it sort of suggests that they have a right to refuse because you're asking them to sign. But they don't have a right. It's the buyer's right, not the seller's right. If you send a notice, it's just the FYI. FYI, we're doing this. Now, they're going to pick up the phone probably and call you and yell at you, but it's the buyer's right. And they should know this. But still, they'll still fight about this. We had this happen recently. It came down, it was even funny. The seller was adamant. They fought so hard. And by the way, it wasn't just the seller, it was listing agent. It's always listing agent. Most of the time, the actual homeowner doesn't have a preference. It's the agent itself. But surprisingly, it even took a call to the broker. And the broker said, well, I'm looking at the contract, and, it says right here, the buyer, maybe trying to just make fun of the other guy, but it says to the buyer, you have a right to, oh, interesting. So that says that in the contract. I guess we have a right to choose. Remember when I mentioned before how important it is to know what it says here? After the listing agent read that part of the contract, that ended the conversation. Okay, yeah, I guess you're right. Stop. This is ridiculous. Come on, it's right here in the contract. Okay. So any questions about that strategy? Yes. Yeah. Yeah, they're sure. Yeah, the question was, if you first-time home buyer, even I'll tell you, multiple-time home buyers often they don't have a preference either. Like, I don't know. I've closed many times before, What do you think? And they ask for your guidance on that. Of course, that's why they're using you. You're the real estate professional. And as far as who to choose, well, of course I'm going to be biased, but I'll say choose people who you trust, who have a good reputation, who you know are going to get the job done, who are going to be accountable to you. That's all real important. So it's just like recommending a termite inspector, a home inspector. You want good people. Of course you do. Yeah. Okay. Let's keep going, and let me scroll down here, and I can't believe it's already almost 10 o'clock. Time flies. It looks like we're not, which is fine. We're not going to get all through the contract. It'll probably speed up, but I'll still want to focus on some of the parts that are tricky here. And some of the things we don't have to spend a whole lot of time on. I'm at the top of page 3 in the contract. This is where you write in the name of the settlement agent, and you can see here, of course, it's no accident. Buyer designates. Even if it's seller preference, and as Deb said, so maybe you send the contract over, listing agent crosses out one title company, put in another one. Well, later, if the buyer signs that, it doesn't feel like the buyer designated. Well, if they sign it, I guess that means they did designate. The down payment part next is just a reminder, hey, you got to bring money to closing. I had a person show up. When was that? That was a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't believe it, but he was surprised he had to bring money to closing. It wasn't as if the numbers, you can get a closing disclosure before settlement, which said it was zero or he was going to get money back. He knew he had to pay. He just didn't know he had to bring it to settlement. I was kind of surprised. He was surprised. But in the event, the buyer's got to bring money to closing. And it says here it's got to be a certified or cashier's check or bank wired funds. I've had someone once ask me if they could write a personal check for $300,000. And I had to say, sir, no, I'm sorry, but you can't. And it's not that we don't trust anyone. Well, it's a lot of money. It's also, we can't wait for a big personal check to clear. We have to draw on that money right away. By law in Virginia, settlement companies have 2 business days from settlement to record the deed and disperse money. 2 business days. So we can't wait 5 days for a big personal check to clear, or longer. I have no idea how long something like that would take. That's why it's got to be some form of funds that are immediately available. Wire or check or cashier's check. Wire is best. Then it won't get lost. But wire or cashier's check. The delivery part is next, and I'll scroll down here. I'll just really summarize this by saying this is the official, what you write here is the official delivery locations for stuff on the contract, for notices, back and forth. Contract addenda, things you want to deliver. Where do I send it? Well, I got to meet my deadline. Well, you have to look at this. And a lot of folks, what they put in here is, let's look at the options. So you can see delivery sent to as follows: A, U.S. mail or hand delivery courier, or a fax. Does anyone use fax? You don't do any fax deliveries? I don't recommend you do fax, or email. Most people, what they do is they put agents put their email address and their client's email address. Okay. I wouldn't just put your client's email address. And it's up to you. Some people just put theirs. Others just put theirs and, with a big and written in on these spaces, their client's email address. I guess I'll leave that to you on how you want to operate your business. But just keep in mind, if you only put your email address, there can be nothing ever wrong with your email. You've got to check it all the time. You never know when stuff's going to come over. If you're on, go away for the weekend, you've got to keep an eye on it, or someone's got to watch it for you because it's crucial. One thing I'll point out to you also that's a little tricky, and I even saw this I think last week I got a contract in where still I saw this. So part A is the delivery location for the seller. You see the language in bold? There's a default delivery. At property address unless otherwise specified below. I still see contracts sometimes, and that get ratified with nothing written in here. So what does that mean? That means the only official delivery in the contract is at the property address. So you're doing your home inspection. You've got to meet a deadline. I got a call on this once over the weekend where that's what they had on this contract. Home inspection deadline for delivery of the report and stuff they want fixed was on a Saturday. The only official delivery location was at the seller at the property address because that's how they set up their contract. The agent called me and said, "David, do I really have to go there? I mean, come on." The listing agent said I can email it to her, and then she'll give it to the seller on Monday. How about that? Is that all right? Shaking her head. Why not? Come on. Listing agent said you can email it to me. Isn't that good enough? No, it's not, unfortunately. So I told him, I said, "I'm sorry, but you got to get in your car. You have to drive over. You have to deliver that to meet the deadline at the property address." What a pain in the butt. You don't want to do that. So that's why I say don't let your contracts get ratified with nothing written in here on any of these spaces, but especially not for the delivery location for the seller. Because that means you're going to be driving to their house, and you don't want to do that. Okay? What a lot of people do when they write up an offer is, of course, they don't necessarily know what the listing agent's going to want written in here. Their email address, the seller's email address, both. Go ahead and write in the listing agent's email address. Go ahead. You're making the offer. You can write in, well, what you want. If they don't like it, of course, they can change it. But at least you're not going to get ratified with having to get in your car and drive stuff over to the house. You don't want to do that. It's especially a problem when no one's there. It's a vacant home. The seller's already moved to California. So you walk in, you've got to deliver something. You've got to meet your deadline. You're going in the front door. Okay, well, no one's here, but I guess that's what I'm supposed to do. You don't want to have to do that. Okay, we talked about delivery. Delivery is crucial, by the way. It's important to meet deadlines, to keep your client doing what they're supposed to do. You've got to deliver stuff to the right location. Paragraph 7 next, the Property Disclosure Act. This is just reminding people if there's a form that's got to be used. Seller's supposed to sign it and deliver it to the buyers, which it's really a disclaimer, not a disclosure. It really says we're not going to tell you anything about this, or historic preservation districts, dam break zones, property condition. It's pretty much a disclaimer. Check out the home yourself. But it's a crucial form that's got to be used. The deposit paragraph. Nope, sorry, I'm skipping ahead because I'm looking at the other page in the binder. The paragraph 8 is Property Owners Association Act. Some people call them POAs, although that sounds like power of attorney to me. HOAs is what this is also referred to as well. Simply where you say yes or no is a home in an HOA. It lays out the rules for what the seller is supposed to do. They first have to inform the buyer, and then they have to get a HOA disclosure package over to the buyers. They've got to order it from the HOA or the management company, and then deliver it to the buyer, whoever the buyer says in the middle of paragraph 8, if you can see that. The buyer writes down their delivery preference, which may be different than what's written on the delivery paragraph. Maybe the same or maybe different. That's up to the buyer. The paragraph 9 for condos is just about the same, right there. Yes or no, are we in a condo, and where is the condo package going to get delivered? Talks about the rules for voiding the contract as well. Generally, it's 3 days from when the buyer receives either the HOA or the condo package that they can void the contract. If it's mailed, it would be 6 days after the postmark, but most of the time those things aren't mailed. You ever seen those packages, by the way? They're voluminous. They're sometimes huge. Not the kind of thing you want to mail. Okay, questions so far? How are we doing? Doing all right? Okay. Paragraph 10 is maintenance, property maintenance and condition. This one we do need to spend some time on. And as far as dispute settlement, or I guess generally on real estate transactions, this is one part where which gets a lot of attention. part of this is worth reading through because it's so crucial. Please stop me, ask questions, because this one, there's a lot of confusion about what the condition the property has to be in at closing. What does the seller have to leave to the buyer? And I'll read part of this if you just bear with me for a second. Except as otherwise specified herein, seller will deliver property free and clear of trash and debris. All right, what do you think that means? What's trash and debris? Other than the obvious garbage, all right, they're garbage bags sitting around in the house. That's probably trash and debris. Sure, yeah, clothes. I don't want your stuff. It's not my size. Yeah, sure. Yeah. Sure, belonging, personal effects. Once a buyer came to closing and they just got to the walkthrough, the seller left a bunch of old TVs on the curbside. Big, thick, those tube TVs. The seller didn't want them. He must have been a TV collector. I don't know. And the buyer said, hey, I don't want those TVs. And the seller said, just call the county. They'll come pick them up for you. Yeah, you call the county. And it's settlement. This stuff's supposed to be gone. So that's trash and debris too. These things, by the way, has nothing to do with value. Ooh, good question. I don't know. Okay, the question was, what about old paint? Old paint cans. Sometimes sellers think, I'm sure they want it because they can, touch up the colors if they mark stuff up, when they're moving in. What about that? What do you think? Yeah, Dennis, you're right. It is technically trash and debris. Generally speaking, this is interpreted to be just about anything you can pick up and carry off. Stuff that's not attached. Old paint cans would be a big one. If the seller wants to leave anything, what's a good way to handle that as a listing agent? You ask. Oh, brilliant. Let's see. Yeah. What do you do? Okay, question one is this. All right, you're doing the walkthrough. You see a bunch of stuff laying around. Old TVs, maybe. Old paint cans. Another big one is tile. People see, yeah, I know. They say, oh, I'm sure they'll want the tile in case they crack one. They'll have these to replace it. They don't have to go buy more. Well, okay, but ask, do you want this stuff? Yes, great. Or no, okay, and we'll get it out. But if there's no conversation like that, which happened before the walkthrough, and you're going through and you've seen all this stuff, question is, okay, what do you do? Well, immediately pick up the phone and call a listing agent and say, okay, so we're supposed to meet you at settlement in a couple hours. There's a bunch of stuff here. Did you know about that? And they may not know. They might have told the seller, hey, I'm so sorry. I guess they ran out of time. Well, okay, but what's going to happen? It is the seller's obligation to get that stuff out. So probably how it's going to be resolved is someone's going to go there right away and get it. You mentioned a couple hours. Well, that's enough time to go get some stuff if it's not too big. Or if you have to, the seller is going to have to get a junk company right away. There are a few junk companies out there that are pretty quick, and they'll get stuff. We'll get stuff out of there. But as a listing agent, I encourage you, ask the seller anything here you want to leave, and then we'll ask the buyer agent. Because very often in those situations, who's the ones that gets that stuff out? The listing agent. You don't want to be stuck having to do that. I know you do it. Maybe it's just to be nice or as an accommodation, or maybe you realize, oh man, I didn't ask. I should have. I'll do it. It's my fault. You don't want to have to do that. Okay. Good. Yeah. Yeah. Janice said you do the walkthrough earlier. Sometimes I can give more time to take care of this stuff. Trash left in the home also. Repairs that aren't done. Seller said they were going to fix stuff. It's not done yet. Two. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh, Oh, oops. Okay. The question was for everybody to hear. You had your own experience where seller promised to get some stuff out from a crawl space, and do some repairs, and then you find out 3 months after settlement the stuff was not fixed. Well, yeah, I mean the seller is technically still on the hook. Part of the contract says that what the parties agree to here does survive settlement. It does, but the longer it goes, the harder it gets. And it is on the buyer to do their own diligent walkthrough. If the seller says I'm supposed to fix something in the crawl space, well, you gotta look. Maybe it's kind of dirty down there, but take some coveralls. I don't know. But if you got to make sure it's fixed, that's what, or somebody's got to take a look at it. Yeah. It could be problematic too if you go to closing and you sign a walkthrough statement that says everything's okay, and then later on you go back and say, no, I was wrong. Well, I don't know. You already signed off on it. That's going to be a tough fight. Okay, trash and debris. We talked about that. Broom clean. Broom clean. Broom clean. Is that a high standard? Broom clean. Reasonable. Well, some people think so. It doesn't say mop clean. It says broom clean. So I'll say most of the time, in my experience, sellers feel the moral obligation to leave the home and looking pretty nice. Some, not always. I'm sure some folks, maybe in this room or who can hear us, can think of stories where that was not the case. And seller left the home, it was quite trashy. Excuse me, but no, room clean. It's a low standard. It's not professional clean. You ever had buyers who expect a perfect, professionally cleaned, shiny home? You will. Don't worry. Even if they read this and you read it to them, they still will have this in their mind. Perfect is not a word anywhere in the contract. It doesn't exist. There is no perfect home. And similarly, it does not say professional clean here. It just says room clean. That's a pretty low standard. And then this is a real important part here. It says room clean and then in substantially the same physical condition to be determined as of a certain date. Okay. The idea is to fix a certain point in time that the home condition should be in so that when the buyer gets to closing, they know what to expect. Okay. The condition of the home is like a sliding scale. It changes through time. Things happen. Homes need maintenance. There's a heavy rain. There's now a water problem in the basement where there was not before. I've seen that many times. Terrible storm. Does anyone remember a few years ago, derecho came through here? We had a closing where just before settlement, a tree blew down, fell on the roof. What are we going to do? Well, that's the kind of thing this is talking about, substantially the same condition. I don't think the home's in the same condition anymore. That roof had to be fixed. But that's what this is talking about, fixing some point in time that the home condition is in so that when the buyer gets to closing, they have an idea of what it's supposed to look like. It's not exactly the same. It's substantially the same. But what date to pick? You can see here the boxes are date of the offer. There's date of home inspection, and then there's other. If you're still with me, yep. Okay. The most common one people choose, and I think it's really the one that makes the most sense, is home inspection. If you're going to fix a point in time for the home condition to be in, what really has to happen on that day? You've got to record the condition. How are you going to do that? Well, let's have a professional go through and make notes and take pictures so we know what the condition of the home looks like. Write down how the appliances are working, and other aspects about the major systems in the home. That's why the home inspection date, I think, makes the most sense. You've got a report. Someone did an inspection. They made a report. So if something changes, say, well, here's my proof. Home inspector said the dishwasher was fine. Now it's not. Fix it. Yes. Yeah. Okay. Well, so that if something else breaks, you mean? Okay. Okay. Oh, I see. Just to make sure that they're really going to do it, and that, right. Well, there is a crucial part here, back at the beginning of the paragraph. It says, except as otherwise specified. So there's your specified. When you agree to certain home inspection repairs, you've agreed to fix it. It's the other stuff where there's no specific agreement on. That's where the substantially the same condition would come into play. As far as the other options here, it says date of offer. What's the date of offer? Well, that was the very first thing we talked about. It's the date you're writing the offer. You're going to send it over usually. What's not happening on that date? How are you going to establish the condition of the property without an inspection? And that's why the date of offer, just to me, doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe if you're not having a home inspection at all, which if the buyer has to waive home inspection or the buyer just doesn't want one, it's a tear down as is, they don't care. Well, that's up to the buyer. But if you are going to have an inspection, and almost always there is, the only date that really makes sense to me is the date of home inspection, because the condition of the home is being established through a professional written report. It's so easy to get into the he said, she said. It was fine before. No, it's always been away. Yes, we when we saw it on the open house, it was fine. No, it was broken. It just looked fine. I'm not going to fix it. It was broken years ago. It's still broken. Sorry, it is substantially the same condition. I'm not going to do anything. So to avoid those fights, you make the condition stuff you want fixed, ask for it to be fixed on the home inspection. The other date there, I almost never see this used because there's really no other date that makes much sense. One strategy to sell the home as is will be to put settlement date here. If you think about what that means, okay, seller is supposed to convey the property substantially the same physical condition as it was or as it is on the settlement date. Huh. Dennis said, you can come in and trash the house. Well, I mean, there is generally in Virginia an obligation on contracts of good faith and fair dealing, so that would probably violate that one. But tree, back to derecho, tree falls on the roof. Hey, I didn't push it over. I'm sorry. I didn't mean it to happen, but, we wrote that in, and I think it's on you. So that's extremely risky for the buyer to put settlement date. That's not what you see is what you get is you can see, but you don't know what you're going to get. So I almost never see that, but that would be one strategy for people to try to sell the home as is. Okay, any questions on that? Substantially the same condition, the date that we're talking about. Comes up all the time. And there's a great term here, substantial. So the home is supposed to be in substantially the same condition. What's substantial? Oh, I don't know. There's not a real definition for it. It's a case-by-case basis. A surface scratch 3 inches on the wall that the movers caused when they were moving the couch. Does that mean the home's no longer it's the whole property, by the way. It's not just the house or that wall. Is the whole property no longer substantially the same condition because that little scratch? Come on. You will find some buyers who will say yes, I know, but that's when everyone else usually rolls their eyes. Okay, but they put the couch through the wall. Okay, yeah, that's a little different. So it is case by case basis, and there's not a clear definition. There's no way there can be. There are too many possibilities. Numerous things that can be changed in a home. So you can't write a specific definition for every single one. Crucial part here, seller was going to have all utilities in service through the settlement date. That's real important. If you've ever been through a walkthrough, how are you going to test stuff if there's no power, no water, no gas? That's hard. So because of that, this was thrown in here. You got to have all the utilities on. And this can come up usually not when the home is occupied, when it's vacant. Sellers turn the utilities off because they want to save some money. No one's living there. Why would I have it on? Yeah, but when you're in a real estate transaction, people have to be able to test stuff. So you got to have those on. Okay. Below that is where the buyer says or the contract's going to say is it contingent on a home inspection or not? Yes or no. The bottom part of paragraph 10. And this, I haven't seen much confusion on this for a while. Well, when this version of the paragraph first came out, people read this last part of paragraph 10 and they thought, oh, it looks like every contract's now as is. It says here, sort of a buyer acknowledgement, except as otherwise specified. It says that a lot in the contract. The property, including these major systems, are going to be as is. Wait a minute, it's all as is? Hold on. Well, there's a crucial part here, is unless, except as otherwise specified. So if you agree to fix the dishwasher, despite this, you're going to fix the dishwasher. That's what the contract says. Okay. All right, access to property, paragraph 11, buyer getting in for inspections, appraisals, those kinds of things. On a real estate deal, people have to look at the home for different reasons. Seller's going to have to let them in. This walkthrough part of this has to do with walkthrough as well. And Dennis mentioned before about what about doing the walkthrough a little bit before settlement. That can be a great strategy, especially if you're just, say, you did the home inspection, asked for repairs, you're asking the listing agent for updates. Hey, how are those repairs going? Everything coming together? I drove by the house. Didn't look like the roof was getting worked on. Is everything okay? And say you're not getting the warm fuzzies. Say, oh, yeah, we're working on it. We're working on it. It's a couple days for a settlement. You think, I'm not feeling so good about this. They said they're doing it, but I don't see any work happening over there. That's when an earlier than just a couple hours before settlement kind of walkthrough might be better, to really go in there and say, okay, here's our list. We know this is not getting done. You need to get this done right now. It does say 7 days prior to settlement. Another part of this also is a parenthetical, the right to make walkthrough inspections, if you see that. What does that suggest? That the buyer can do more than one. I know it's not very convenient to have to schedule it and go with your buyer more than once, but for them to protect their rights and to get the seller to do stuff, it might take, unfortunately, more than one. In every case, it's a little bit different. On all cases, you're going to need that? Probably not. But you'll get a feel for it. You'll see how things are going. Because if the work is getting done, the listing agent usually is happy to tell you, hey, we're looking forward to going to settlement. It's going to be great. Here, repair invoices. Just want you to see the receipts that the work's being done. Awesome. Great. If they don't send that stuff to you, that's usually not a good sign, especially if you're asking for it and they're avoiding you. That doesn't look good. Okay. But if you do a walkthrough, say, so this allows up to 7 days before settlement. If you do one 6 days before settlement, you need to do another one. 6 days, a lot can happen in the house. Okay, so even if it's just a real quick check, make sure, okay, the work is done, stuff still works, let's go to closing. Okay. Utilities, I got about 10 minutes. Let me see here. I can probably, The utilities part.
David?
Yeah.
David?
Yeah.
David?
Yep.
Why don't you just cut it off there? I'll pick up on Thursday with that.
Okay.
And then maybe if there's any questions or questions they may have.
All right, sure.
For you, like stump the attorney or something for a few minutes.
I'm in trouble now. Stump the attorney. Or just questions on the parts that we covered so far. What do y'all think? Oh yeah. Informational, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Or something, yeah. Yeah. The question was, do the buyers still do an inspection even if there's not going to be a contingency for it or a way for them to get out of the contract? Did that phrase your question? Yeah, as Dennis said, I totally agree. They at least they got to take a look. Yeah, do an inspection. Part of the home inspection contingency, the current form, this recently changes. There's another paragraph they wrote in there allowing just this. People sometimes, in the past, they would write in their own sort of contingency, and they would say something like home inspection, informational purposes only. buyer can't void or ask for repairs, or they would write in something. But now there's a form for it. With all these forms, if there's a form to handle what you're trying to do, use the form. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. You don't need to create your own. So yeah, they should at least still do some kind of an inspection. Unless it's a tear down. Well, that's up to them. They're a builder and they're going to tear it down. Maybe they don't care. But any other questions? What do you think? Stump the attorney? Yeah, well, that's fine. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, sure. Great question. The question was this: there are certain parts of the contract that don't apply. What do you do with it? It's one entire document, so I wouldn't just leave out a page. But yeah, yeah. So those specifically, yeah, there's a box you can check. Is some paragraphs that don't apply, you can even cross a whole line through it if you really want to. Yeah, sure. If you're not an HOA or condo, you don't need to read those parts. You just check no, that it's property's not in one of those. Yep. Yeah. But it is good, before you make an offer, really at any time, in fact, before, it'd be better, before your buyer actually finds a house they're ready to write on offer, give them a draft or just a mock-up contract to read. Say, look, this is the form we're going to use. Leave it all blank if you want to, but just so they can start getting familiar with it, so that when they're ready to make an offer, they go for it, and then they don't have to take the time. Hold on, Dennis. I know you're telling me they got multiple offers and that property's going to go fast, but I need to run this through my lawyer, and it's going to take a few days. They might lose that house. They should be ready to pull the trigger when they find the right home. Yeah, that's a big one. As far as settlement goes, yeah. Home inspection process, there's going to be, there's a lot of back and forth on that. Buyer will send over a list of 20 things they want fixed. Seller says, no, I'll fix this stuff. And then they go back and forth a few times. A lot of dispute, when it comes to home inspection. But when it comes to settlement, paragraph 10 is one of the biggest ones that comes up, the condition of the home. If it's not what the buyer expected, they're not going to be happy. And then we're going to have a discussion about that. But leaving stuff there, it's a big one. Getting the seller to fix all the things they asked for, that's a big one. This maybe is related to the question you asked before, but how do you handle it if there's something the seller didn't do that they were supposed to do? There are a few options. Well, sure. And looking at it from the big picture, should a $500 item blow up a whole deal on its $800,000 house? I mean, come on. But I will tell you, even a $50 item, sometimes people will get so upset. They'll say, I don't care. I'm not closing. You're supposed to fix that $50 thing. It's a matter of principle. Forget it. Hold on. That's when I reached into my wallet. Okay, all right. What's it going to take to? But no. There a few options are these. Is one, of course, if it can be resolved before settlement, great. That's the best way. So you do your walkthrough, say 2 days before settlement. You notice something's not fixed. You call a listing agent and say, listen, we asked for that plumbing thing to be fixed. Hopefully the response you get is, Dennis, I'm so sorry. You're right. I told my seller he didn't do it. I gave him the option to find his own plumber. He's out of time. I'm going to get my guy in there. He can get in there tomorrow. I'll take care of it. Great. That's the best way. They do what they're supposed to do before settlement. We're done. If it can't be done before settlement, or they won't do it before settlement, who knows why? A couple other options would be this. A credit, maybe. If everyone can agree on how much it's going to cost, so say $1,000, Seller says, yeah, I didn't get around to it. I'm sorry. Take $1,000. Buyer says, okay, I'll take your $1,000. And they do it as a closing cost credit. They write up an addendum saying that. The lender's going to need to see it for approval, but that's one way. No, if as soon as it's determined that it's not going to be fixed by settlement, and as soon as everyone agrees on what the resolution is going to be, most lenders are pretty good at giving approval for those things quickly. It depends on the lender, but most can approve it that fast. And this, well, yeah, that can be tough. That can be, digital signatures can be great for those circumstances, but sometimes that won't work if the lender says for whatever reason, no, we can't get it approved that fast through underwriting, or if they say no, the buyer's already got too many credits, they can't get more. Then there are other options. Would be where the buyer agent or the buyer picks a contractor who can do the work that's required. It's better for them to pick it than that's not on the seller side. If the seller has to pick a contractor in that situation, they'll probably find the cheapest guy they can find. But the buyer, they should make the choice. So if that contractor doesn't do it right, the buyer has somewhere to go. The seller just would issue a payment to that contractor at closing right out of their proceeds. After settlement, we issue a check, gets paid for, work is done, and that's it. It's not a credit. It's not an escrow. It's just a payment. Seller's going to take care of it. It's not the preferred way. Best is all the stuff is fixed before settlement, but it can still get people, where they want to go. The escrow option is usually it doesn't work. People sometimes say, oh, well, let's hold an escrow. It's fine. I'm sure the lender will be okay with it. $5,000, we'll hold an escrow, and then later on when the work is done, the settlement company will pay out of that $5,000, the invoices. Lenders hate escrows because it suggests that there's something still held, after settlement. It's not fully resolved. There's something that is broken in the home. Something's not right in their collateral, and this repair escrow is held to fix it. They want, and it really is better for everyone, go to closing and you're done. You're not going to fight about something later on, which escrow can lead to. The seller says, all right, it's fixed. Give me back the escrow. The buyer says, no, it's not fixed. You guys did a terrible job. Now you've got another fight in your hands, and it's 3 weeks after settlement. You don't want to be there, and neither do your clients. They just want to go to closing. It's better for them. Wash their hands and walk away, and it's finished. Nothing else to dispute after settlement. So the escrow option, I would not recommend that at all, and most lenders don't approve it anyway. Oh. Dennis asked you to do an addendum saying seller's going to have a certain amount of time after settlement to fix it with no money involved? Or so there is money involved? You mean like where? Oh, okay. Well, any money between seller and buyer, it's got to be approved by the lender. But sometimes I have seen it where there's no money involved and the seller just says, yeah, we're going to fix it. It's up to the buyer what makes them comfortable. If it seems like, all right, they've been doing a good, this hasn't been contentious. There's a good reason why it's not fixed. The plumber I really wanted was on vacation. I'm sorry he didn't get around to it. If the buyer is comfortable with that, they can agree just on the seller's promise to fix it after settlement. That's up to them. Okay, well, it's about 10:30. Thanks, guys. And we're going to take a break, and I think David Donaldson said he'd be over here to talk about .loop. Anything else for now, Deb?
No, thank you so much for filling in.
Okay.
I really appreciate it.
No problem. You feeling better?
Working on it. Fever-free for about 12 hours.
12 hours. All right. Okay. Well, I'm going to...
So I should be there on Thursday.
Okay. That's good news. Hope you feel better. I'll turn this off, and David Donaldson will pick it up.
Okay, thanks everyone.
And I think I'm going to stop recording if I can figure this out.